Okay, so hopefully you've watched the first video in this tutorial series, and you've downloaded R and RStudio and MikTeX or another LaTeX distribution, and now you're saying, okay, I don't know what to do. I've never used these programs before, but I do know that I want to make a reproducible paper. Where do I go from here? So that's what this episode is for. We're going to talk about the RStudio environment. We're going to talk about using R and things we can do to practice getting good at data analysis in R. So here I have RStudio up here. I made a new folder called Reproducible Papers. There's some stuff in there we'll talk about. So let's open up RStudio. Okay, so here's RStudio, and what you probably see is something that looks like this. So you have your console, you have some files over here, and this is probably empty, like that. So this is RStudio, and RStudio you can think of kind of as a graphical user interface or a GUI for base R. And what R is a statistical program that is a platform that can be used by other people to build packages that then extend the functionality of R. So R has packages built in, like linear model, like ANOVA, like t-test, things like that. But let's say you want to bootstrap. Let's say you want to do, mapping. Say you want to map something onto the US and look at densities and states or something. These are things that are not in base R, but the community of R users have built these packages that then extend the functionality of R to do those things. The community around R is amazing. Hundreds, if not thousands, of people have made free-to-use packages for R. All you have to do is cite them in your paper, that these are the packages I used, these are the people who made them. It's a really, really great community and a great place to look for help. So I'll preface this whole thing by saying I am not an expert in R or RStudio, but I am a user of R and RStudio. That said, there are a lot of times that I screw up and I need help. And so Google is my friend, and Stack Overflow is my friend, where I go and I look for help in all these different places for my problems in R. Happens all the time, nearly every day. So if you run into something you're not used to, that is totally fine. Okay, so here we are. We're in R. We want to open a new R Markdown file. So you come up here, like last time, we go to R Markdown file. Now, this is what you'll see, and since we have HTML and PDF and Word available, let's leave it HTML for now. Let's call this first RMD. Now open up here. Now, these are the four windows you'll usually see when working in RStudio. This is your R Markdown, which we've talked about before. It has chunks for code, it has areas for text, and all that good stuff. So this is the document that's going to be knit to create your final scientific paper. Down here in the lower left is the console. This is the window of base R. So whenever you're running a chunk, you'll see the process of that code being run in the console. If an error comes up, the error will come up in the console. And when you knit your R Markdown file, you'll see the progress of that happening in the console. The console is very important. You can also run code directly in the console, but I prefer doing it in the R Markdown because it keeps it all there in the document. Using the console is a little more like using the terminal if you're used to using the terminal in either Windows or Mac. Up here in the top right is your environment. So one of the cool things about R, it's similar to other languages like Python, is that you can assign data to objects. So let's give you an example. So here I am in my chunk. Now I can say I have this object X. Now I can assign anything I want to X. Let's say X is 5. So I can run that, and to run that one line on Windows, I hit Control Enter. Now I have a value here, X, is 5 in my environment. So now, if I print x, I get 5, right? Now I can change x. I can make x 5 plus 5. So now you see here, up here, in my environment, x is a value 10. Now when I print x, I get 10. Now I may have even printed 5 over there before. That was a mistake, but you understand where I'm going with this. You can make an object in R, and those objects then go into your environment. So everything that you run will wind up in your environment that then you can call later on when writing your paper. You can call things from the environment. And down here in the bottom right are your files. So R works by setting something called a working directory that you can use to move files into kind of your working space. Right? So right now I don't know what this is, so I can go over here to my 3 dots, and I can go to desktop, hit OK. Now this is everything in my desktop. Here's that file, the folder that I made, Reproducible Papers. Now I want to set this as my working directory. I can just click the More arrow here and set as working directory, and you'll see down in the console that a line of code ran that says set WD, open parentheses, and then a destination on my computer. So what you can do is take that, put it into the very beginning of your code, and now that will always be the first thing that happens when you run your file. It will set the working directory to wherever it is you want. So just to consider that. Okay, so these are our 4 environments. We have our R Markdown file, we have our console, we have our environment, and we have our files. So I will be completely honest with you. One of the hardest things for me to start using R was reading in data. It's not like you can just click File, Import Data. I mean, it's here, but it doesn't work as smoothly. What I found to be the best thing is to import CSVs. So I have all my raw data in CSVs, and then I run the CSVs into R and make it an object. When you put a data file, such as a CSV, and assign it into an object, like we just talked about, that then becomes something called a data frame. So let's do that. So over here in this folder that I made, Reproducible Papers, I have an example spreadsheet. And this comes from government data. It's mortality rates per state. So let's call this example data. And that will be read.csv. So this is a function that's in base R, read.csv. And here we're going to put the file only as it exists within our working directory. If we were somewhere else, not in our working directory, we would have to put in the whole destination. But since we've already set our working directory, we can just put in the file name. So you have to put in quotes, example underscore CSV dot CSV. That's what I named it. And then I know my data file has headers, right? The columns have names. So then I want to say header equals true. Now if I run that, I get here, it says data in my environment. So here's the object, example data. It has 15,028 observations of 4 variables. Now that's a lot, right? A cool thing about RStudio is that you can click on this and actually see the spreadsheet in RStudio. So if I click this, it opens a new tab, and here I have all my data that was in the example underscore CSV data file. So I have the year, I have the state, I have all causes deaths, how many people have died due to all causes, and the age-adjusted death rate. So here I can see very easily all my data as it exists in this data file. Now it goes on for 15,028 rows. Now that's a lot of rows. And that's something that is also a particular of R, is that R likes long-form data, not wide-form data. So if you are accustomed to working in SPSS, you are usually using wide-form data in SPSS. So it might be that each state is 1 row, you have 50 rows, and then each column is a year, and then in that you have all causes death. So in 1999, all causes death, 1999, age-adjusted death. Now that would give you a very wide file, but only 50 rows long, because it's only 50 states. R does not like that type of data. It's much better if you can, before you load in your data, turn it into a long form type of data. Now if you can't do that, there are ways to flip it in R. We won't go over that today, but there are ways to do it. So if all you have is wide form data, you can still use R in RStudio. But in the future, if you're collecting data or you're organizing raw data, long form is the way to go with R. So here you can see it's long form because we only have 4 columns, but 15,000 rows. Cool. Okay, so we've read in our data, and that's how data is read in all the time. So I predominantly use CSVs, and so I'm using the read.csv function all the time. There are other functions that you can use, other packages that might be, maybe you have data from some special program or some proprietary program. Go and look and see if people have built functions to import that data into R. Most of the times you'll find someone else who's encountered that problem before. Okay, so that's loading in data, and I promise, if you practice loading in data, you'll feel more and more comfortable doing it, and it'll almost come second nature. It was a huge barrier for me to start using R, and now I do it all the time, and I found that it's super, super easy.